where we're not just accurate, but we are spot on. That's right. I'm back, your host, Tony Monk, here to give you the good old world of sports. Look, it's Friday, people. I'm glad to be back. I've been asked to come in and sit in for a couple of shows with you guys to bring you back some good sports. And I gotta say, I'm super excited because of the time that we are in. Sports isn't over just yet. It's getting to that slow period. We got March Madness coming up soon. Obviously, the NFL Combine to happen next weekend, and then we got some good people to help bring you some opinions and takes on that. So coming up on this episode, we're going to talk to Fernando Mendoza. Is he worth that first round draft pick, and is the Raiders worthy of drafting him? Because it's a little bit of that too. Because the Raiders got a lot of problems. So we're going to talk about George Pickens. George Pickens signing his franchise tag. Obviously, and then the Cowboys are going to do a tag and trade with that, and then we're going to discuss some March Madness. NCAA insider Don Wesley is going to come on and kind of, give us his takes on that. So, but right now, to kind of jump into this Fernando Mendoza thing, we're going to hear his thoughts on being the number one draft pick.
Use LinkedIn as your social media. You sort of use it to update your resume. I just want to let you know you really don't need to do that. But it's been so fun following that. And you have a recent post where it appears that you are, in fact, looking for a job. You've made it official. You're declaring for the draft. And all of the experts and pundits and the bookmakers say that for sure it looks very probable that you will be first pick, first round. If that is the case, have you given any thought to playing for one of your idols, Tom Brady, who's one of the owners of the Raiders?
Well, first of all, if drafted by any team, I'd be so grateful, and I could only do this with the glory of God. And it would be a dream come true. From a two-star recruit, the reason I had this whole entire LinkedIn persona was, hey, I'm probably not going to make the NFL, so let me double down on my networking, on my connections, and let me get a little ahead in the corporate lifestyle so when I graduate college, I can have a foot up other than other student athletes.
The Oakland Raiders' supposed savior, the next number one draft pick, the next prototype quarterback that many of NFL media fans are going to parade over for the next 3 months. Indiana's Fernando Mendoza. And we're going to talk about if this guy is worth being drafted at the number one spot. But I don't have to figure that out by myself, because joining me is a really long-time friend of mine, a good friend of mine, and a face that you guys should find familiar. Andrea Richmond, my friend Bordy McBoard. What's going on, friend?
Oh, especially talking about some good old NFL and particularly this draft pick. I was very glad that you chose me to talk about this because I feel a certain way about Fernando Mendoza.
So we're talking about what we feel, and obviously there's been a lot of talk, and there's going to be a lot of media takes going forward about what type of player Fernando Mendoza is. And one of the things that we're going to talk about, Bordy, is him just being drafted at number one. We can talk about the previous quarterbacks. We'll get into that. We could talk about the rest of the guys in his class. We'll get into those things. But there is a thing here with the Raiders too, right? And the quarterbacks that they have drafted in the past. And this isn't the first guy that the Oakland Raiders, that the Las Vegas Raiders, are going to be selecting at number one. And obviously they've been there before, and they were burned in the past, and they've had very terrible quarterback play, and they've been burned in the past. And then when we're talking about Aiden O'Connell, Connor Cook, Derek Carr, and what he could have been, and then the horrid experiment that was Jamarcus Russell. Morty, when we talk about what the Raiders can potentially get out of a guy like Fernando Mendoza, what does that look like to you?
Well, if you look at all those picks that we're seeing right in front of you, obviously it can only go up from here, right? Unfortunately, they have not hit with a lot of these picks. Aiden O'Connell out the league, Connor Cook out the league very quickly. Jamarcus Russell was touted as a very high level athlete. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out and he didn't commit as much to the game. Derek Carr in the second round actually gave them probably the most from this pick. And this is why this Fernando Mendoza question becomes a lot more enticing, a lot more questionable, because although I do believe that eventually Fernando Mendoza could probably get to a level in which he can be a decent NFL quarterback, if you look at what he shows on the field, being a number one pick, it's a lot to ask for, right? If you think about it, in the last 10 years, we've had plenty of number one picks who are doing things that we haven't seen or were very frenetic, right? We've seen Kyler Murray, right, throw it all over the field, win Heisman's. We've seen players like even Jared Goff, right, was not known for somebody like a big arm, but at least was very athletic and was able to throw off the run. You've had several Heisman winners. Even somebody like Bryce Young doesn't have the biggest arm, but at least he had pocket poise in order to deal with the tumultuous situation that he was about to occur in Carolina. And even so, it took him about 3-4 years, like just now, before we're really starting to see him flash. Unfortunately, if you look at this Raiders team, you have somebody like Geno Smith, who is a multi-year starter in the NFL. Last year, he played for the Seattle Seahawks, and that offensive line was struggling. He still was able to produce some pretty good numbers. Then he went to the Raiders, and that offensive line was one of the worst that we've seen in the league. Unfortunately, Ashton Genty, the number 7 pick, and Geno Smith could not produce underneath that offensive line. And if you look at Fernando Mendoza, this is a guy that doesn't have the best arm in the world. Unfortunately, only 22% of his passes are down the middle of the field. That is something that, as a highly touted quarterback, you're going to want there to be more in the middle field, because you are going to be tested in the middle of the field. Isn't a very good runner. Isn't a very good runner when it comes to shiftiness. In fact, that national championship run was probably the best run I've seen from him. And there are a lot of deficiencies when it comes to him in his play, as talking about a number one pick, because we're used to seeing so many number one picks be some of the best players in college football. I really feel like this Indiana team, although he did play well and executed the offense well, I don't think that it really leaned on his talents. And I feel like this Raiders team, unfortunately, is going to struggle. And you can see this Kubiak's guide to Mendoza, right? Only played 3 snaps under center. RPO heavy too, as well. So not used to a pro style offense. There are a lot of deficiencies to his game when you're talking about a number one pick.
So, but Bordy, when we talk about the deficiencies, right? But when we look back at Indiana's schedule, and at
Mm-hmm.
least to end the season, we're talking about wins against Ohio State, wins against Alabama, wins against Oregon, wins against Miami. These aren't cakewalk teams.
Oh
Like
no.
Mendoza did take Kurt Signetti's squad with a group of 3-star guys that he's seen good defenses, and neither of those times did he look like he was lost.
Well, and you know what? I think that we don't give enough credit to how complete this Indiana squad was, just because of the fact that they were 3 stars. Let's be honest. A lot of them had played 4-5 years of college ball. They were very polished players. You look at their wide receivers, very good, tough balls, contested balls they were catching, really winning individual routes. If you look at their offensive line, particularly that right guard, they made sure that Mendoza was protected. This is not something that he's going to be afforded, unfortunately, going to this Raiders squad. You look at their wide receivers, Trey White was one of their best ones, and unfortunately, he's really only a winner of 1v1 situations, a speed guy. They don't have anybody that can really win contested balls anymore, especially ever since they let go of Jacoby Myers. You do have Brock Bowers, so that does help them, right? You do have somebody down the middle of the field, but unless it was in the RPO situation, you really don't see Mendoza attack that, particularly the zone. That's something that he struggles with, really attacking and finding that anticipation in the zone. and also to weak side and backside pressure, right? Front side pressure. This is something that you're going to encounter a lot in this Raider squad. He is good when he does see the defender right in front of him. He can hang in the pocket if he knows a rusher is coming, but I just don't feel like he can sense that enough. I'm not saying that he's a scrub, right? Obviously, he's touted as a number one pick for a reason, but in particular, this draft class, when it comes to quarterbacking, there aren't a lot of options, unfortunately, and unfortunately, outside of the quarterback position, other highly touted positions like left tackle in the center spot, in the edge spot, you do have guys who are good, but are they an upper echelon to pass on a quarterback? This is where the Raiders find themselves in a situation to where, yes, Mendoza is a good quarterback and he's produced well, but is he truly worth that number one pick like some of the previous number one pick quarterbacks that we've seen in the past? I have a lot of question
And
marks.
Bordy, let's take a look at that at the quarterbacks that was previously chosen in the past, and then we have to do a comparison and contrast to say, oh, this guy got drafted,
Right.
and it is if Mendoza was in last year's draft, or was he in 2024's draft class, 2023's, where would he be? Now we see guys like Caleb Williams, Jaden
Mhm.
Daniels, Drake May. These are guys that have obviously appeared in NFC and AFC championships at least 1 to 2 years into their careers. But the difference is none of their teams are going to be what the Las Vegas Raiders are going to be.
Mhm.
And he's coming into a situation like you said with Brock Bowers, a growing running game with Ashton Genty. The Raiders are going to have to figure out a plethora of things on the offensive line and whatever they're going to do at receiver. But let's talk about this 2024 draft class, because that was probably the most prominent class to come through
Right.
and be rather successful. Where do you see Mendoza as opposed to where he falls between maybe Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, obviously Drake May? These guys have made significant jumps. JJ McCarthy, the jury's still
He
out. We're
doesn't count.
waiting to see what that's going to be. But we're waiting to see what that's going to be if it's not too late. But
JJ McCarthy, I don't know.
where's Mendoza on this list?
Um, Obviously JJ McCarthy, and I felt like at the time a lot of people did think that that was a little bit of a reach at that time. But if you look at Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May, even Penix, the arm isn't there. Unfortunately, dealing with pressure isn't there. I rate Bo Nix also ahead of Mendoza. He would be above JJ McCarthy. I think that JJ McCarthy was always probably a third, fourth round pick. But honestly, if you look at all of these quarterbacks, Mendoza is able to operate an offense well and execute it well enough, right? When it comes to throwing with anticipation, when it comes to ability to sense pressure, and when it comes to throwing more than outside of the field in the intermediate field, right? Even his nine balls, I feel like have much to be desired. And by nine balls, I mean the go route deep outside, which are one of the hardest throws. I feel like Williams, Daniels, May, and even Nix can really hit that spot way more than Mendoza has. And especially when you're going to such a talent depleted team, you have really only a few options to really heavily lean on. And so I feel like these growing pains will be very rough for a guy like Mendoza, because as we talked about, you look at the rest of the class, his class that he's fighting for positioning for, there aren't a lot of options there too. So he will be drafted higher just because of it.
So we're going to talk about what QB development looks like, right? Because at the end of the day, every guy has to get his chance. And Tom Brady said some comments that we're going to get into just in
Right.
a little bit later. But when we're talking about his tangibles and intangibles for Fernando Mendoza, right? Smart guy, he's savvy, he has heavy shoes. I do believe he will use his legs despite not being as
Yes.
mobile as Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams or any of those guys, or even some of the guys in his own draft class. We have that up right now with Ty Simpson or even Carson Beck. 'Cause Carson Beck can move.
Hmm.
Allar from Penn State can move.
He can
But
move.
even relative to his own class, right? And
Hmm.
Dante Moore and Chamberlain or decided to return back to Oregon and Ole Miss, respectively. But they would have been guys that were slated into the top five. If you do want to include those guys, even with the remainder of at least the top five quarterbacks now that are actually going to be drafted, where does Mendoza fall here? And we're not going to talk about strength of the quarterback draft class. We obviously know the one from 2 years ago is a lot better than this one. This one may be
Yes.
relative to last year's, but is there Mendoza and then everybody else, or hey, Mendoza is just that clear cut because he's just that good relative to coming out this year?
I'm actually really frustrated that Trinidad Chambliss fought so hard to come back to college because, in spite of his height, I really feel like he was one of the better draft picks of this class. Was able to throw on the move, was able to throw with anticipation. I saw him hit difficult throws down the field in high leverage situations at least once or twice per game in certain games, 4 or 5 games. Obviously, didn't end the year very well and threw a lot of interceptable balls. But that being said, that was probably his worst performance of the entire year, probably one of his worst performances in his college class. So he probably would have been one, and it would have been Mendoza after that. Unfortunately, if you look at this draft class, the only guy that has the tools, right? The toolsy guys that have been drafted a lot early in early rounds. Only Alar has that, and unfortunately, Alar has decision-making issues. Alar can kind of be a bull in the china shop, right? Then if you look at somebody like Simpson, Nussmeyer, and Beck, unfortunately, they have not been able in uh, situations with pressure, whether it be high leverage situations or with defenders on them, they've come up short, not the best armed either, and just have not been able to elevate in a way that you will see somebody like Chambliss, right? Mendoza, I think one thing that makes him special, and I don't want to get on him too hard because it does seem like I'm talking about somebody who would be closer to be drafted like in the third round rather than the first round. I do want to give him credit. Outside of the numbers, he is a very good thrower. And when I talk about anticipation, he throws the guys before they reach their break, right? Which is something that you really want from a quarterback. I'm talking about anticipation down the field, in the middle of the field, really getting them in the zone, right? That's something that he needs effort. He has struggles with, but he can hit the deep third, right? He can hit that. He drives the ball well. I think he has good velocity. I just think that, and I also think too, you talked about it, Tony, when it comes to his running ability, in the middle, in between tackles, just like we've seen from Jackson Dart, we see that from him, and I think that'll help him, seeing as though that he has some deficiencies in the middle of the field throwing. But that being said, that development, he's going to need a lot of it early on because there are some things that he just doesn't quite have that a lot of number one picks that we're used to seeing just had from the jump.
So we don't want to be Debbie Downers, right? And
Oh
just
no.
say what he can't do for the Las Vegas Raiders. I keep calling them Oakland, for the Las Vegas Raiders. So let's try to step into some things that he can obviously give to Las
Yeah.
Vegas, as well as what he's getting himself into. And I think there are four success factors for Mendoza. And obviously, we had the graphic up earlier about Clint Kubiak and that guy
Mhm.
to Mendoza and what could be done to help him. We go back to what Clint was doing with Seattle, right?
Yep.
And how he was able to get guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba moving around. Now, obviously, there's going to be some cats coming out in free agency at receiver, and they can have some options there. They can look at it, and we can talk about later on what they will do in the second round and beyond, of trying to get a guy after Mendoza is taking the helm. But I would imagine that Clint Kubiak can really get
Mhm.
Mendoza into positions that will really help him win. And the great thing about Mendoza is everything, the real mental battle for him and what Clint can help with is going to be between the 20s on both sides of the
Yep.
field. Once this guy gets in the red zone, he's one of the best there is, especially that's coming in 39 touchdowns scored since 2024. So I think with Clint, this has to be a thing. We look at his NFL comparison to Jared Goff, right? And we're saying system versus the tangibles that he already comes with. Mendoza can lean on the Clint Kubiak system and for the first two, right, as quarterbacks need that time. But eventually, if the system plays to him and then he responds in tow, Mendoza isn't without with the skill set,
Mhm.
right? And if his run games works with him, and Brock Bowers just getting moving around the field, they can create matchups and just, we got a guy with great accuracy. Maybe can't push the ball downfield, but that doesn't mean in a time passing tap, 3-step drops, boom, balls out. This
Mhm.
offense can be methodical. Doesn't have to be big boom or bust plays, but methodical. 5 yards in the cloud of dust. I think that works very well for them. And right now, I want because I want us to listen to something that Tom Brady said in regards to allowing quarterbacks time to develop. He spoke about last year back in September, quarterbacks and why they normally need time to integrate into the NFL.
To truly be a field general, like all the guys that we admired growing up, the John Elways, the Dan Marinos, the Joe Montanas, I think you better have a mental advantage on the field. And I think sometimes that's more important than the physical advantage.
Brady was not the physical tangibles
Yes.
guy. He ran like a
Hmm.
7 flat in the 40. He didn't have incredible arm strength. But when it came to diagnosing in the mental aspect of the game, nobody, and Peyton was the field general, right? But nobody was better than Tom Brady. And now he's part owner. He has part ownership of the Las Vegas Raiders. He understands what it's going to be for Mendoza. How big is that for Mendoza to be in this situation?
Oh, I think it's huge because as we talked about, like he's used to an RPO heavy system. He did not play in a pro style system. And I feel like if he is in a system that relies on timing, if he is on a system in a system that allows him to one read, go and just push it, I think that he will execute an offense really well. His ball placement is very good, right? For as much as I talked about middle in the field, he is able to execute RPO slants. We have seen him hit in the middle sometimes in between three defenders. And these are things that you're going to have to do at the NFL level. I also like the mentality of Brady seems that he is willing to let a guy sit. And as we talked about, most number ones, they're just thrown into the fire. We saw that with Cam Ward, right? Unfortunately, even though how well he was as a thrower, unfortunately, there were a lot of deficiencies in that offense, and he still struggled, right? The Raiders are in a great situation because they have somebody like Geno Smith ahead of him, right? And Mendoza is somebody that I feel like can sit and wait, and he's a super smart guy too. So if he can just wait to fix some of the things I talked about, his efficiency, throwing on the run, right? I feel like that's something that he can work on mechanically because unfortunately, this is something that, he loses at the top, right? So this is something that he can actually work on. You look at him diagnosing fields and just understanding what's going on, throwing with anticipation. If you listen to his interviews, he knows what's happening, right? So I have no doubt that he'll be able to do that. And he doesn't throw a lot of turnovers either, which is really good for a rookie quarterback. I don't think that he'll put the ball in dangerous way, but I don't think this organization will put him in dangerous way either. You have a veteran quarterback. You have an owner, a GM, Tom Brady, who knows that, hey, you're not going to want to push the handle with a guy if you feel like he's unprepared. And you also have Clint Kubiak, who will draw up and draft up things to make sure that he will never be too over his breath because we've seen Sam Darnold, how he's transformed as a quarterback underneath his system. I feel like Mendoza, whatever deficiencies that he's in an excellent spot to really fix them.
Well, certainly going to be an exciting time for the Las Vegas Raiders. They need a savior badly. They've been quarterback starving in purgatory for as long as we can both remember. If nobody's doing it worse, the Las Vegas Raiders are. Boyd and McBoyd, everybody. We really appreciate you, Frank, for jumping on with us and talking some Fernando Mendoza. Coming up
I'm always here to talk
next.
ball.
Yeah, all the time. We'll be back, Frank. We'll be back. We're gonna be doing more of this. But we're gonna get ready to move on, guys. Coming up next, we're gonna talk those Dallas Cowboys. He's been a talk of the town since he stepped in last year. George Pickens is up for a new deal, but he's been tagged by the Dallas Cowboys. We're gonna talk about whether they're gonna keep him or just it's this the tag and trade. We're going to talk about the draft situation. Spot on Sports coming back in a moment.